proceed further with the next topic here, which is virtual network peering. Some of these things I have already discussed earlier. Once it comes to virtual network peering, it will be communications which you want to establish between machines across virtual networks, right? Both these networks that we're mentioning about, VNet1 and VNet2, are in Azure environment itself, right? So once it comes to virtual network peering, there are different type of virtual network peering that one can have. One is your regional VNet peering, right? And second is your global VNet peering, right? When you say regional VNet peering, means within the same region, within the same subscription, you have two VNets, right? And you are establishing a peering between those two environments, those two VNets. Whereas global VNet peering would mean these are two different regions, Southeast Asia and East US, something like that. So between two geographically available locations, geographically available regions, you are establishing a VNet connectivity, VNet peering. Okay. Now this can also be done across subscriptions. VNet peering can also be done across subscriptions. It is not essential that both these VNets should be in the same environment, in the same subscription. Correct? Now the question here is, where it is across subscription, how do is there a security concern over there? Now once it is across subscriptions, you will need to have permissions to access that resource, right? So you need to have permissions to access the second virtual network in another subscription. Only then you can establish a cross subscription peering.
Yes.
So once it comes to your VNet peering that we are creating, which means minimum we need to have is two virtual networks over here. You can create more number of VNets, but minimum you should have two VNets to start with. So right now I have only one VNet, and this is in Southeast Asia. Let me add one more VNet over here. It can be in the same resource group or it can be a different resource group. Resource group doesn't matter. Like I said earlier, resource group is a logical grouping. Let me create one more VNet over here. I am not looking at the IP addresses over here, because when I create an IP address by using the Azure portal, it will ensure that it is non-overlapping. Okay, so I'll leave this as it is. Let me go ahead, click on review and create. Meanwhile, this is creating. Let me take up one more virtual network in another region so that I can show you both these examples. Right now, I don't have two different subscriptions, so I can't show you that option here. Let me take this in East Asia. IP addresses. Let me change it to 10.2.0.0. Subnet name default 10.2.0.0/24. So right now, if you see, I have three virtual networks, two in the same region and one in another region. So I hope everybody is able to follow it. So two of them are in the same region, VNet and VNet2. Third one is still in progress. Yeah, that's done. So 2 in Southeast Asia and 1 in East Asia. So if I do a VNet peering between 2 in the same region, what kind of VNet peering is it? If I do a peering between 2 virtual networks in the same region, this is regional VNet peering. Okay. And if I go and do a peering between 2 VNets in another regions or separate regions, that is global VNet peering. Okay. So let me proceed further. Let me go to Subhash VNet, the first one. And here you'll see an option of peerings. Let me go to peerings over here. Let me add a VNet peering. So what is the name that you would want? So here, if you look at the presentation that we were discussing, VNet to VNet communication we are enabling by doing a peering connectivity. So when you are doing this VNet doing this peering, right? And if you see the diagram over here, it says it cannot be an overlapping address. That's why we have ensured we have 10.0.0, 10.1.0, 10.2.0. It cannot be an overlapping IP address ranges. If you have an overlapping IP address range, it will be a problem. It will not allow you to do a peering. Is that part clear to everyone? Now, while you are creating this, you may allow gateway transit if you have a VPN gateway. In my environment right now, I have not created a gateway anywhere. So in my scenario, I will not be able to show you the option of gateway transit, right? So if you have a VPN gateway created already, in that case, you can use VPN gateways. Let's proceed further. VNet 1 to VNet 2, traffic to remote virtual network, allow communications. Is there a routing server that we have? I don't have any routing server. Okay, so here if you see, do you want to allow forwarded traffic from your remote virtual network? Block the traffic that originates from outside virtual network. See, many a times what happens is, if there is a connectivity between machine 1, which is in VNet 1, to machine 2, which is in VNet 2. So what is the source of origin? So if the source of origin is a first machine, we know that this is our environment, correct? But if the previous machine is just doing a forwarding means it is not verifying whether the content or whether the request is appropriate or not. That could be dangerous. So it is not recommended to forward that traffic as it is. Right? Communication with remote virtual network is okay, but don't do a blind forwarding. Don't just forward anything that you have. So you'll have to be careful with that. So when you're doing this communication, I want to enable this communication from VNet 1 to VNet 2, and also the reverse is required. What is the reverse here? VNet 2 to VNet 1. So you also want to have a reverse communication, which means VM2 in VNet 2 can connect back to machine in the previous virtual network. So allow remote virtual network, block traffic which is originating from outside this virtual network. Clear everyone? What I'm doing is I'm enabling communication from the first network to second network and second network to first network. It is internally using the regional connectivity option, regional peering. Because both of them are in the same region. If you go to your virtual network and go to the peering section, you should be able to see this option. VNet 1 to VNet 2, the connectivity is enabled. Similarly, VNet 2 to VNet 1, this connectivity is also enabled. Both of them don't have a gateway. Now, what is this gateway all about? What is the significance of gateway? I'll come to this separately. I remember I moved that slide to the last, so I'll come to that section there. Let's go to peerings. Let me add a peering, which is a global VNet peering. VNet 1 to VNet 3. Peering link name for the reverse one will be VNet 3 to VNet 1. Virtual network name. Now here you will realize, even if we are doing global VNet peering, there is actually no properties that you have to mention over here. There's no additional properties that you need to mention over here. The reason being, behind the scene, you have Microsoft infrastructure, which involves connectivity between these resources. You don't have to specify any additional properties, even if the resources are across two geographical regions. So if your resources are hosted on Azure, Microsoft will give you a fast infrastructure communication options, and you just have to logically create those resources over here. So once this is done, we should be able to see our peering over here, which is global VNet peering. So VNet 3 to VNet 1 is done. VNet 1 to VNet 3 is still happening. So in terms of peering, what I mentioned is your IP addresses cannot overlap, right? When you're using your gateways, right? Don't use forwarding over here. The request should originate from the main machine itself. Don't use VNet forwarding. So if you look at your options over here, choosing between your virtual network peering and your VPN gateways. So I have said that we did not create a VPN gateway over here. Now, what is this VPN gateway all about? Let's understand that first. So it will be easier for you to understand the significance over here. Once it comes to VPN gateway, your VPN gateway basically is an enabler of communication between two environments, right? And it also keeps a track of how much of information is moving from one environment to second environment, right? In your on-premises environment, I'm not sure how many of you are aware about that, you have something called as VPN device, right? You have a VPN device. So in your through your VPN device, we are communicating, or we are enabling communication between our Azure environment and your on-premises environment, and vice versa. Now, once it comes to Azure, on Azure, you can create a VPN gateway. Okay, here you can create a virtual VPN gateway as a device. That's why it is called as gateway, and it is a virtual appliance within Azure. So I was mentioning about VNet peering, and with this VNet peering, what is the significance of VPN gateways? Now, once it comes to VPN gateways, there are different set of options that you have or SKUs that you have, which will help you to define how much of data you are passing. Because here, any kind of outbound traffic or incoming details, outbound traffic, you are charged for it, right? So VPN gateway helps you to get the extra latency, limited bandwidth if you want, right? So initially, when you are creating your project, you may need a large amount of data to be transferred. That's where you can take a different kind of VPN gateway SKU. Later on, you may want to move down or reduce the VPN gateway SKUs, right? Those things you can do with VPN gateways. But this is more, I would say, legacy kind of approach. The recent approach that you have is your virtual network peering. In your virtual network peering, there is no virtual appliance, no devices to be created over here. This will give you extra latency, right? And help you work even with your high bandwidth scenarios. That's the most important aspect of virtual network peering. So in terms of implementation, I have already showed you the steps. So I'll quickly run through this. You need minimum of 2 virtual networks. You don't need to go to the peering section. I'm sorry for this. This UI has changed. Allow forwarded traffic, I have disabled, but now it has changed. The Microsoft has changed the UI. But the feature initially it was a toggle button. Now these are radio buttons. So I've modified those things because I know what is the significance of these members. So even if I have to do it through PowerShell or through CLI, I know the significance of these members. Okay. Now, if you realize what I have done right now is I have done something called as service chaining, right? But unknowingly or not knowing the architecture we have done. So if you look at this hub VNet, Subhash VNet basically is a hub VNet. VNet 2 and VNet 3, both of them are connected to Subhash VNet. Am I correct with that? Subhash VNet 2 and Subhash VNet 3, both of them are connected to Subhash VNet. So Subhash VNet behaves as a hub VNet. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, one was regional and one was global that we are connecting.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But both of them are connected to the single VNet. So that's how it behaves as a hub VNet. There could be any more number of VNets as well, which can be connected to hub VNet. Now, what will be the advantage of that? The advantage of this hub VNet will be here you can have your single point connectivity with your on-premises environment, other virtual networks, your point-to-site connectivity. So if any one of these machines in VNet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have to connect to these machines, all that communication will happen via hub VNet. Getting it? All that communication will happen via hub VNet. Even if I want to create something as a firewall solution, I don't have to create a firewall in every VNet. I can create that firewall in my hub VNet. So anything which is coming from on-premises environment or other environments, that will get filtered. Anything which is going from my environment to on-premises, even that will get filtered. So this becomes a central point of management when you are having these kind of enhanced communications. And as an architect, you need to understand that all your applications need not be as simple and straightforward. Most of your applications will require hybrid connectivity. And this service chaining, hub and spoke architecture will help you in building up a hybrid environment where you have third-party sites, where you have on-premises environments that you want to connect to, right? You have your multiple Azure resources that you want to connect to. So you'll have to create a complex architecture over here, which will help you enable hybrid communications. Does it make sense to everyone? Okay. So in terms of service chaining, depending upon what is the status right now, so you'll have to check whether it is updating or it has done the connectivity, right? So in my case, right now, both of them are connected. So regional connectivity and also global connectivity. Both of these things are being enabled over here. Both of them are connected. So I have showed you a demonstration of this. I have configured VNet peering and we have confirmed the VNet peering as well. So in case you want to remove this VNet peering, you can directly go to your peerings over here, modify or change whatever values you want. You can see your remote VNet ID. You can see the address space for connectivity. If you want to delete any of the resources, delete the peerings.
So you said hub VNet or something like, is it a separate service or like you just use the word?
No. Hub VNet is not a separate service. It is how you have configured that VNet. That's it.
Oh, okay.
So you can go here, click on delete. This will help you remove any of your pre-existing peerings.
Okay.
So what I showed you was examples of regional VNet peering and global VNet peering. Like I said earlier, global VNet peering is more in terms of connecting to VNets across different regions, right? So you can use your remote gateway or you can use allow gateway transit. So earlier, what we had as VNet to VNet connectivity, even that part can get resolved over here, right? Your VNet to VNet connectivity can be replaced by using your gateway transit, right? Now, what is this gateway transit? I can have a VPN gateway, like I showed in the example earlier. So I can have a Azure VPN gateway, which is connected to your on-premises VPN using site to site. So I don't have to use any kind of additional connectivity. So I just connect to this gateway, and through this gateway, I can connect to my on-premises environment, which will help me build up the hybrid scenario. Now, third point is very, very critical over here, which I want everybody to pay attention. You cannot modify or delete any of these address ranges. What do I mean by that? You'll have to be very, very careful when you are deciding the address spaces, because once it is defined, you cannot modify that once you have done the peering. That's why, if you remember earlier itself, we said don't create VNets with small IP ranges. Take up a larger IP range so that you don't have to modify it in future. The only reason why people would want to modify it, because earlier I had 2 or 3 subnets, right? Now I want 5 more subnets, which is not possible in the existing VNet. So you'll have to delete the peering, then add increase the address space, add more subnets, do the peering once again, right? That will be a pretty lengthier process, and that will disrupt a lot of communication that you are doing within your machines. To avoid that kind of issues, in the beginning itself, take up a larger VNet space so that you can create any number of small subnets within that as you want. I'm not referring to the next point over here because this will be more in terms of management of existing resources. Currently, most of your application that you have, I'm not even based on my experience recently from last 3 to 4 years, I have not seen any kind of classic deployments. Classic basically would mean the older deployment. The earlier IaaS model which Microsoft had, that was the older model. So I have not seen last 3 to 4 years of any of the classic VNets or the older VNet models which you need to integrate, right? Currently that you see is your IS version 3.0, and for with that you can easily do your VNet to VNet peering without any problem. But you need to be aware about this. Even exam, I have not seen questions from classic deployment. This is more in terms of managed applications which are very old or legacy applications on Azure. Now this is a very important point in terms of virtual network peering and VPN gateways, because once it comes to hybrid networking or hybrid communication between your on-premises environment and your Azure environment, there are two approaches. Which approach will be better? That connectivity, that distinguishing, you can do it from here. Okay, so I would recommend invest some time in terms of understanding what are the options available over here and in which scenarios. Like Chennai has been mentioning about, Om Prakash, if you can, Subhash, if you can mention about what are the scenarios where we should use VNet peering or real world implementations of this, right? So you can see the real world implementations in the discussion points mentioned over here. In what scenarios, how the pricing model will change, and if I'm not mistaken, I mentioned about the gateway queues, how much data you can transfer. You can see the options over here. So basic, gateway 1, gateway 2, how much data you can transfer between two environments when you are enabling this communication. So each of the solutions that we are creating, guys, we'll have to work with the restrictions. We have to work with what are the options currently available given by the vendor. So it is necessary to know what those options are or what those limitations are. Okay. So that's why before we choose any of these options, it is essential to know whether you want communications within regions, across regions, how much data that you want to transfer, right? Do you want to work within subscription? Do you want to work across multiple subscriptions? Do you want to work with hybrid model, or do you want to work only with resources in a single environment, which is Azure environment? So based on those parameters, you can decide which of these options will be better for you. So if you look at the network limits over here, each subscription you can have 1000 virtual networks, 3000 subnets per virtual network, and you cannot go beyond 500 virtual network peering. Within every network, I can have one virtual network gateway and one express route gateway. So two gateways I can create. Okay. So based on these limitations, you have to decide whether to go for virtual network peering or VPN gateway. Most of my implementation which I have done, recent ones, earlier ones I had used VPN gateway because that was the only option at that point in time. But from last 3 years, all my deployments have been working with virtual network peering. I need to do virtual network monitoring over here to understand how much of data has been transferred from one environment to second environment, and I have to pay accordingly, right? In case of VPN gateway, the advantage which I was getting is if the bandwidth is being consumed, right? If the bandwidth is being consumed, it will automatically slow down, but it will help me save cost. Today, the kind of money that customers are paying, I have to least bother about the data transfer costs. Today, what people are saying is, I want faster access of those resources. I want quick transfer of data, right? And when I'm giving them showing them the billing, or I'm showing them how much data has been transferred, so customers are not worried about paying that much, right? So in recent scenarios, wherever I have worked with, in all my projects, I have made sure we are using virtual network peering. Even if you see the time taken, this is very, very, very fast. 30 minutes, I don't agree with this. This takes more than 45 minutes. To create a VPN gateway, it takes more than 45 minutes at times. Whereas if you look at virtual network peering, you can quickly create a peer and you can quickly delete that as well. So this is much, much reliable. There's no bandwidth limitations over here, like you have your gateway queues, right? You don't have to worry about that, but you have to keep an eye on how much of data is getting transferred. That you have to be careful because Microsoft charges you for amount of data being transferred from one environment to second environment. Okay. So see guys, I'm not saying that everything will be cleared in the first read itself. You'll have to go through it time and again. Understand this wherever you have, because networking is something which is a deep dive subject. People who have a good networking background, it becomes easier for them because they know how these things have been working within their on-premises environment. Azure is just adding some of these things on top of it, trying to make these things simpler for the administrators. But it's not 100% change, that I can assure you. I already showed you this option by going by the link. It's the same resource, same details being mentioned over here. So if you look at your virtual network peering, the use cases over here would be your data replication, data failover, database failover scenarios, right? Whenever you have frequent large backup of information. Whereas if you look at VPN gateway, this is for applications which are not latency sensitive. Now that is a difficult thing to ask in today's environment, right? Because every application today is latency sensitive. We want faster access to data. We want quick movement of contents from one environment to second environment. Okay. So with this, we complete off with our virtual networking module, especially focusing on the infrastructure piece over here, how these things are, how these resources are communicating between each other. So go through the.
So what is the importance of a region or location that we select while creating any resource?
Very good question. Now, once it comes to region or location, first thing is not all services will be available in all regions. Not all Azure services will be available in all regions. That's one. If you want to pick up a specific service, right? If you want to work with a specific service, you'll have to just make sure you select a right region for it. So which region has that service? That's one. Second important aspect is even if that service is available in that region, the cost will be different. So different regions have different costing for the same service.
Okay.
Right? This is second point. Third point, when you are creating these resources, third point, when you are creating these resources, some of the resources can be accessible across regions. Some of the services may not be accessible across regions. Say, for example, I have a virtual network and I want to create a virtual machine in another region. I can't use this network over there.
Okay.
Are you getting it?
Yeah.
So that could be some of the causes or some of the reasons why you have to select a right kind of service created in a specific region or a location.
Okay. So the reason for my question was
Yeah.
when we create a network group,
Mhm.
a resource group, so usually all the services under that, all the resources under that should be following the same location that we have selected the resource
No,
group on,
no,
right?
that's a wrong point. No,
So
within one
what?
resource group, the
Mhm.
resource group could be in a specific region, but that does not restrict or that does not have anything to do as far as the region of the the location of each of those resources. Resource group is a logical boundary. So if
So
my
what?
resource group is in Southeast Asia, I can
Mhm.
create resources which is in US. I can create resources which is uh, in any other location across the globe. Region, the pricing that we are mentioning is more from the billing perspective, the currency
Okay.
format that you have used. It is more from
Uh,
the billing and the currency format. Microsoft would want to know that this user is from which location.
okay.
Resource group location has nothing to do with resource location.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, got that.